All right, so happy Wednesday, February 24th. We will focus on characterization and how characters changes affect the theme, right? What do the characters change? And boy, we saw it change pretty quick, right? In the story that we're reading, she went from the sweet, perfect wife to boom, and hit a home run with her husband's head. So we will do the work now. I will read and think about how the desires, anxieties, and behaviors of a character adds to the literary work's meaning. And a lot of us mentioned yesterday, why did Roald Dahl um, create this character that was apparently the perfect wife? And a lot of people mentioned the shock value, right? She is so sweet. She's so kind. She does everything. She's totally, just submissive to whatever she thinks her husband wants. And that she would just turn around and do that is very ironic, very shocking. And a lot of people, like, we all kind of know what irony means. Well, that was a perfect example of irony there. The textbook definition is the difference between appearance and reality. She seemed so sweet, so kind, just willing to do anything. And then what happened? Boom. And that's what makes it such a shock. A lot of people think, bad luck, bad things happening, that automatically makes it ironic. It doesn't. Things can be sad and unfortunate and bad coincidences. It doesn't make them ironic because they have to seem one way and reality not be that way. So here's my example. There was a song from the 90s called Isn't It Ironic? And most of the stuff in there isn't ironic. It's just unfortunate. Old man turns 98, wins the lottery, and dies the next day. And the song goes, Isn't it ironic? And well, actually, it's not. He's freaking 98 years old. How long do you expect him to live? A 98-year-old man dying is not ironic. The fact that he wins the lottery, yeah, that sucks, no doubt, but that doesn't make it ironic. This one, young man, turns 21. He's young. He should be healthy, wins the lottery, and dies the next day. Which one is ironic? It's obvious, isn't it? So we have to remember to think about that. Irony is a difference between appearance and reality. Same thing with our story, which is ironic. Difference between appearance and reality. Angry wife has been in and out of mental institutions because of violent tendencies, kills her husband. Well, there's no irony there. We know she's violent. We know she's been in mental institutes. There's no irony in her killing her husband. But our character, yeah, y'all get it. More ideas of irony. Once again, appearance versus reality. The marriage counselor, the appearance would be she would know how to make a relationship work, is getting a divorce. That's ironic. The fire station, they put out fires. Appearance, they burn down. Also, there's dramatic irony. We're going to see a lot of dramatic irony further on. The audience knows, but the characters don't. And kind of like, remember the Shakespeare thing that we watched where they were playing a trick on their friends and they didn't know it. That's very much dramatic irony. The second half of this story is very much dramatic irony, and you'll see what I mean in just a few minutes. Okay, so before we do anything else, let's do our positive affirmations, tell ourselves how to think and how to be positive on purpose. What are you? I am strong, confident, and successful. Yes, we are. And how do you feel about reading? I love reading. It's so much fun. And how do you feel about schoolwork? The harder I work, the stronger I become. Absolutely, we rock. All right, so let's get to our, oh yeah, I have another Carvajal comedy. I have a horse named Mayo, and sometimes Mayo neighs. I know, that's just dumb. All right, so if you go to Tuesday's work, this was a grade. I have quite a few zeros on this, so be sure and take care of that as soon as you can. But let's get to today's work, Wednesday's work. Lamb to the Slaughter Part 2. Open up your own copy. And this is not a graded discussion, but if you want to chime in for today, why do you think Roald Dahl ended the story with her giggling? Does this make the story more or less believable? Why? And here's Lamb to the Slaughter Part 2. For those of us that have zeros, I have grades to make up. Woohoo, you're in luck. Missing grades, take the quiz on lamb to slaughter, message me. You got to message me. I ain't going to be looking. You tell me. And I'll replace a 0 for a daily grade, not going to major grade. So if you were passing, if you have all your grades turned in, don't do this. This is not a grade in the class. It's only a makeup grade if you're missing something. So keep that in mind. If you're missing something, pay attention so you can get a good grade on this quiz. Let's get started. Lamb to the Slaughter Part 2. If you missed yesterday, Mary Maloney is such a wonderful wife. She has everything ready for her husband because he comes home tired from work. She's 6 months pregnant. She's wants to make dinner, and he says, no, just sit down. And he says, basically, I'm leaving you. I'm leaving you, my pregnant wife. And that's all there is to it, right? So she goes to the freezer. She says, I'm going to make dinner anyway. And she gets out this leg of lamb for dinner. And they never tell you what she's going to do, right? That kind of builds up the suspense and the shock with the leg of lamb. At that point, Mary Maloney simply walked up behind him, and without any pause, she swung the big frozen leg of lamb high in the air and brought it down as hard as she could on the back of his head. She might just as well have hit him with a steel club. She stepped back a pace, waiting, and the funny thing was that he remained standing there for at least 4 or 5 seconds, gently swaying. Then he crashed to the carpet. The violence of the crash, the noise, the small table overturning, helped bring her out of the shock. She came out slowly, feeling cold and surprised, and she stood for a while blinking at the body, still holding the ridiculous piece of meat tight with both hands. All right, she told herself, so I've killed him. It was extraordinary now how clear her mind became all of a sudden. She was thinking very fast. As the wife of a detective, she knew quite well what the penalty would be. That was fine. It made no difference to her. In fact, it would be a relief. On the other hand, what about the child? What were the laws about murderers with unborn children? Did they kill them both, mother and child, or did they wait until the 10th month? What did they do? Mary Maloney didn't know, and she certainly wasn't prepared to take a chance. She carried the meat into the kitchen, placed it in a pan, turned the oven on high, and shoved it inside. Then she washed her hands and ran upstairs to the bedroom. She sat down before the mirror, tidied her hair, touched up her lips and face. She tried to smile. It came out rather peculiar. She tried again. Hello, Sam, she said brightly, aloud. The voice sounded peculiar, too. I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and I think a can of peas. That was better. Both the smile and the voice were coming out better now. She rehearsed it several times more. Then she ran downstairs, took her coat, went out the back door, down the garden, into the street. It wasn't 6 o'clock yet, and the lights were still on in the grocery shop. Hello, Sam, she said brightly, smiling at the man behind the counter. Why, good evening, Mrs. Maloney. How are you? I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and I think a can of peas. The man turned and reached up behind him on the shelf for the peas. Patrick's decided he's tired and doesn't want to eat out tonight, she told him. We usually go out Thursdays, and now he's caught me without any vegetables in the house. Then how about meat, Mrs. Maloney? No, I've got meat, thanks. I got a nice leg of lamb from the freezer. Oh, I don't much like cooking it frozen, Sam, but I'm taking a chance on it this time. You think it'll be all right? Personally, the grocer said, I don't believe it makes any difference. You want these Idaho potatoes? Oh, yes, that'll be fine. 2 of those. Anything else? The grocer cocked his head on one side, looking at her pleasantly. How about afterwards? What you going to give him for afterwards? Well, what would you suggest, Sam? The man glanced around his shop. How about a nice big slice of cheesecake? I know he likes that. Perfect, she said. He loves it. And when it was all wrapped and she had paid, she put on her brightest smile and said, Thank you, Sam. Good night. Good night, Mrs. Maloney, and thank you. And now she told herself as she hurried back. All she was doing now, she was returning home to her husband, and he was waiting for his supper, and she must cook it good and make it as tasty as possible, because the poor man was tired. And if, when she entered the house, she happened to find anything unusual, or tragic, or terrible, then naturally it would be a shock, and she'd become frantic with grief and horror. Mind you, she wasn't expecting to find anything. She was just going home with the vegetables. Mrs. Patrick Maloney going home with vegetables on Thursday evening to cook supper for her husband. That's the way, she told herself. Do everything right and natural. Keep things absolutely natural, and there'll be no need for any acting at all. Therefore, when she entered the kitchen by the back door, she was humming a little tune to herself and smiling. "Patrick," she called. "How are you, darling?" She put the parcel down on the table and went through into the living room. And when she saw him lying there on the floor with his legs doubled up and one arm twisted back underneath his body, it really was rather a shock. All the old love and longing for him welled up inside her, and she ran over to him, knelt down beside him, and began to cry her heart out. It was easy. No acting was necessary. A few minutes later, she got up and went to the phone. She knew the number of the police station, and when the man at the other end answered, she cried to him, "Quick! Come quick! Patrick's dead!" "Who's speaking?" "Mrs. Maloney. Mrs. Patrick Maloney." "You mean Patrick Maloney's dead?" "I think so," she sobbed. "He's lying on the floor, and I think he's dead." "Be right over," the man said. The car came very quickly, and when she opened the front door, 2 policemen walked in. She knew them both. She knew nearly all the men at the precinct, right? Her husband's a police officer. And she fell right into the chair, then went over to join the other one, who was called O'Malley, kneeling by the body. "Is he dead?" she cried. "I'm afraid he is. What happened?" Briefly, she told her story about going out to the grocer and coming back to find him on the floor. While she was talking, crying and talking, Noonan discovered a small patch of congealed blood on the dead man's head. He showed it to O'Malley, who got up at once and hurried to the phone. Soon, other men began to come into the house. First a doctor, then 2 detectives, one of whom she knew by name. Later, a police photographer arrived and took pictures, and a man who knew about fingerprints. There was a great deal of whispering and muttering beside the corpse, and the detectives kept asking her a lot of questions, but they always treated her kindly. She told her story again, this time right from the beginning, when Patrick had come in and she was sewing, and he was tired, so tired he hadn't wanted to go out for supper. She told how she'd put the meat in the oven. It's there now, cooking, and how she'd slipped out to the grocer for vegetables and come back to find him lying on the floor. "Which grocer?" one of the detectives asked. She told him, and he turned and whispered something to the other detective, who immediately went outside into the street. In 15 minutes, he was back with a page of notes, and there was more whispering. And through her sobbing, she heard a few of the whispered phrases. Acted quite normal, very cheerful. Wanted to give him a good supper. Peas, cheesecake. Impossible that she. After a while, the photographer and the doctor departed, and 2 other men came in and took the corpse away on a stretcher. Then the fingerprint man went away. The 2 detectives remained, and so did the 2 policemen. They were exceptionally nice to her, and Jack Noonan asked if she would rather go somewhere else, to her sister's house perhaps, or to his own wife, who would take care of her and put her up for the night. No, she said. She didn't feel she could move even a yard at the moment. Would they mind awfully if she stayed just where she was until she felt better? She didn't feel too good at the moment. She really didn't. Then, hadn't she better lie down on the bed? Jack Noonan asked. No, she said. She'd like to stay right where she was in this chair. A little later, perhaps, when she felt better, she would move. So they left her there while they went about their business, searching the house. Occasionally, one of the detectives asked her another question. Sometimes Jack Noonan spoke to her gently as he passed by. Her husband, he told her, had been killed by a blow on the back of the head, administered with a heavy, blunt instrument, almost certainly a large piece of metal. They were looking for the weapon. The murderer may have taken it with him, but on the other hand, he may have thrown it away or hidden it somewhere on the premises. It's the old story, he said. Get the weapon, and you've got the man. Later on, one of the detectives came up and sat beside her. Did she know, he asked, of anything in the house that could have been used as the weapon? Would she mind having a look around to see if anything was missing? A very big spanner, for example, or a heavy metal vase. They didn't have any heavy metal vases, she said. Or a big spanner? She didn't think they had a big spanner, but there might be some things like that in the garage. All right, we're just past line 100 on page 5. find out what happens. Do the police figure it out? And how it ends. So finish reading. If you have a thought about the discussion, answer the discussion. And we'll talk again the last couple of minutes of class.